All right, welcome everybody. Today our objectives are to reinforce UDL Implementation Trials Toolkit Part 3, Stages 1 and 2, and engage in an idea exchange and problem solving around UDL Implementation Trials work. You'll see that we have this differentiated for folks that are new mentors to the project, as well as folks that are continuing mentors to the project. So you'll be using the UDL Implementation Trial Mentor Toolkit Stage 3 in that second part of our work today. We invite you to open up your own Learn, Do, and Reflect journal that you may have made a copy of during our kickoff. Make some notes for yourself so you can come back to that and know what your to-do list is. And we're going to start out today by getting ourselves into the UDL Trials Mentor user group in the UDL Forward community. So if you could click onto this post, at the end of our kickoff, we asked you to be prepared to share your big step that you may have taken to prepare for or launch the UDL implementation trials with your team. So when you click on that link, go ahead and share what your big step has been in planning for or kicking off with your teams. Oh, Sherry, I'm so glad that you were able to establish your teams. I know that that's one of the things that is the first barrier that people experience. So I'm glad that that was able to happen in your district. Mercedes says that you have a team that's excited to learn more about what it's going to look like. Everybody is excited to know what it's going to look like, and it turns out to look like how it looks in your district. So be prepared for the need to develop that as you are working with your team. And David, it looks like you've established partnerships and planning more explicit steps with other district mentors. That's great. That planning part's so important, and keeping everybody on the same page and feeling like they're going in a direction that they don't have to be worried about where they're going. Okay, Reggie, establishing a coaching team, knowing the teachers that you're going to work with. 4 different sites. That's exciting. And then your students. That's wonderful. And you began your baseline observations. Well, we'll be interested to hear how that's going. Carrie, you met your team at Baldwin Woodville to determine your academic focus and refine your engagement rubric. That's great. And tying that to the SLO and PPG work this year. That is really great. That's really great. And I'm glad that the team's excited about that too. Michelle is going to take us through our next activity.
Yes, and we did have a question in the chat, Joe, about do I need to sign up for the group to be able to post? And so I believe in the mentor user group, that is a private group for our network. So you will need to request to join in order to post. As Joe had mentioned, and some of you had mentioned in the post this morning, that planning piece is really important as you design what your trial windows are going to be, who's going to be on your team, what kind of support is going to be available, when teams are going to meet. As you recall, or may recall from the September 18th training, we really talked about 3 big components of getting you ready to launch into the trials work. One of those components was the roadmap. One of those components was the academic rubric and deciding what your focus was going to be. And one was selecting the data tool. So we decided today that we want to start where those pieces actually come together to help us get going. But what we'd like you to do is individually, we'd like you to think about what questions do you have about the roadmap, or what questions do you have about other districts and how they've set up the roadmap or how they are using the roadmap. We'd like you to also ask some questions about the academic rubric. If you've gone through that process, what would you like to learn from other districts? If you're at the point of beginning to build that rubric, what questions do you have? And then the data collection tool. What tool did you decide to use? What would you like to learn from other districts? And what we're going to do is individually, we're going to have you post your questions on the Padlet. Post your notes, and we're going to engage in something called a lightning talk once we have all of our questions, or things we'd like to learn from other districts posted. All right, excellent. It looks like we have a good collection of questions to start from. So we're going to do a little check-in with everyone. For a lightning talk, you're going to be able to do some self-selecting. Joe's going to put you in random breakout rooms, and you will have 10 minutes to select questions from the sandbox and talk through your ideas, how you address the questions, and any questions that you are not able to come to a conclusion or get some ideas around, or if the questions are still lingering, Joe and myself will be the last lightning talk at the end. The main goal of the fast-paced dialogue is to spark new conversations and collaboration. And it's really a great opportunity to learn from a larger group of folks in a shorter period of time. So Joe, my thought is I don't know about the groups that you have been with, but my groups are asking fabulous questions, and they also would love to see some examples of things. So I know we have, a good pace on our agenda. What would you think if we did lightning round, but as a full group instead of going into a smaller group, and we can tackle some of the wonderings that folks have been sharing?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so I don't know if this is possible. I really believe it is. So our data collector tool, we have some of our mentors that are spreadsheet people, which is fabulous. But the visualization of what it looks like when data is entered is kind of a big question mark. So the thought is, would it be possible to share a sample data collector with data in from a team, either in the past, that we've previously worked with, so folks can just get an example, a visual of what that looks like?
The data collector tool is a template for you to use, and you can modify that however you want to make it work for your district. But we do not support any fixing of any of the formulas that are meant to provide some automation in it. And then just recall that all of the calculations on the data that we need will need to be done by hand. So
A few other questions came up around collecting baseline data, and the idea of, if you're changing students, do you do another baseline with the new students? Or do you use the trial one data that you have and just, note that there's new students and move on to trial two?
Just to clarify the question, are they wondering if it'll be the same group of kids for trial one, but trial two will be a set of new kids? Or they're switching out one of the kiddos? After baseline data?
Yeah, Kari, do you want to kind of throw up your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm working with a high school group, and so at semester time, they do a lot of block classes, so they will be completely switching kids for the most part. There's one teacher that does skinnies, so she won't be switching kids, but most of my other teachers will be. So my question is, when I look at the semesterized roadmap template example, it has baseline, trial one, and then baseline two, it says, and then trial two. So my question is it's different than what we did last year. So I'm wondering what baseline two looks like. Because it is going to be new students, so are we really just doing a baseline and a trial, and then another baseline and a trial with new kids? Or is there a connection that we should be making between, even though it's different students, between that initial baseline and then trial one, trial two, whatever? So
what I would say about that, if there's nobody that has any other thoughts about that right at this very moment, is that those teachers who are switching all of their students would be kind of a team on their own, and they would start a new baseline with new students second semester, and they would include practices that they put in first semester as part of their baseline. So for example, if in semester one I did a baseline with a group of students, and then I was able to put clear learning goals into place that first trial, when I start my baseline with my second semester students, my baseline including the practice of clear learning goals, so that the trial one for semester two with my new students ends up being student self-assessment.
Thank you.
So Joe, Reggie is saying only doing one observation doesn't seem like you would be getting enough data to observe change.
Yeah, so in each of the trials, we aim for each data collection window to include 3 observations of every criteria on the rubric. So we know that that's not a lot of data points, but it is, this is indicator data, not PhD level data. It's data that we used along with our professional judgment to make meaning out of whether it's actually our practice change is having an impact. So we aim for as much data as we can collect, because I agree that low numbers of data points is a low confidence level. But we also need to balance that with the overburden that teachers may experience when being asked to collect lots and lots of data. Rachel, you had experience with that when we worked with the Green Bay group. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that amount of data and the meaning that was able to be made with the amount of data that were collected by the team.
I think it was meaningful, the data points, because we were looking more for trends and not, like specific, percentile growth or something that, needed a lot of data points. And I think it was still impactful with that number. And to echo what you were saying, busy teachers being overwhelmed, it helped their mindset to know that, okay, there's, only this many times I have to gather it. I can do that. As opposed to feeling like another heavy burden on all else that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just
Okay,
add
thank
on to
you.
that a little bit?
Please do.
So, and I understand my situation was much different last year than it is how I feel this year. So, but if possible, what we did this year is we actually, just this week, we met as a team and we went through the engagement rubric, like criteria, and then we put down some specific look-fors to build consistency throughout all of our practices. And I'm observing one time, the special ed director is observing one time, and the high school principal is observing one time. And then we're asking teachers to try to at least get one observation piece in as well. So we would potentially have 4 data points for each trial, but we're spreading it between, not just putting it all in the teacher, which there is a consistency piece there. But again, we tried to because last year we did the same thing, but we didn't have that conversation about consistency. And so I think this year, but we would discuss it still throughout. So we would say like, oh, making personal choices. Well, yeah, they're choosing to not do their work. That's a personal choice. Like, how do I rank, So those kinds of things. But this year we're able to have the actual conversation to come up with some, and we felt like some of the criteria were a little bit more like, okay, we don't need a whole bunch of look-fors, but like we really have a common understanding of what this would be. But for some of them, we did put look-fors, and then when I made paper copies of the rubric, I just put those look-fors on there so that we have them in front of us all the time, whether you're doing it digitally or, a paper copy. So that I hope will be really successful this year, and it's a way to help, again, I have a team that's able to do that, but and that's not ideal or possible in every district, but if you're able to kind of share that responsibility but be on the same page at the same time, I think that's a strategy that we tried last year and then are trying to make it even better this year.
The question I have, so one, the principals that you're having go into and making these observations, did they do the UDL leader training so that they have an understanding of UDL?
I did a 4-day, or sorry, not 4-day, a 4-hour professional development session with the whole team. And we are having leadership meetings beyond that, probably once a month or so. So I would not call it an official, it's not like the leadership training that Mia and Carrie Jo have been working on. I don't have those materials or that capacity yet. But I met with them like at the very beginning of August, and then they attended the UDL professional development 4-hour thing that I did. And then we met again last week before we met this week with the whole team. So we're just trying to scatter leadership meetings throughout all of the work. And those meetings will provide opportunities for us to have some discussions. So are they experts in UDL? No. But do they have the understanding of the teachers? Yes. And am I able to support them more as needed? I would say potentially yes. It kind of depends, but yeah.
And then, so part of it, like, we were told don't bring principals into these observations because it's going to feel like an evaluation for them. And so then, are we able to bring principals in? Can we make it part of EE? Should we be making this part of an evaluation, like as UDL, if they're doing good universal practices? Is that something that should be observed during an EE observation?
I'm going to jump in here real quick, Reggie, because there's no requirement in the project to do any particular thing. But
Okay.
I would caution against, now Carrie, in Baldwin Woodville, the principals might not be seen with a sense of evaluation when they come in. So in some districts, of course, principals are seen as learning leaders, and there is not that sense of evaluation when the principal comes in. So I think that's very context specific.
Okay.
And the trials process is meant to be plan, do, study, act cycles, where it's an experimental process to try something and see what the impact is, not an evaluation process. Now, we do have districts that are using this whole process as part of their SLO and PPG work, but the districts that I'm familiar with that are doing that don't use educator effectiveness as an evaluation tool. They use that as a coaching, PDSA type tool anyway. And we are going to go into the next project partner to-dos. When we were at the kickoff meeting, we gave you a list of things that had to be accomplished for partnering with us in the project. And this is the list of things that need to occur. We need project partner agreements from each of the schools and districts that are participating with us. And to be able to fill that out, you go into this form, and the project partner agreements can be printed out. It includes a publication audio video release form. The district that you're with takes on the responsibility of assuring that we have an agreement with everybody that could be shown in the video. And then also a district data sharing agreement. And this outlines that we won't be collecting any student data, that any data that you share from your district gets consolidated, and that the district name isn't shared with us. I mean, the district name won't be shared beyond our groups. And we do have to share that information with the DPI. So once you fill that out, PDF your filled out forms, add that PDF file to the link here, and then submit it so we can have those agreements. We do have completed forms from Baldwin Woodville and Two Rivers, so thank you very much for putting those in, and we look forward to getting the other forms from the other districts. And then finally, not finally, but the next thing is last time we were together at the end of each of our meetings, there is a mentor survey that helps us track whether our work is helping you. And we had 5 responses at the kickoff meeting. So thank you to the 5 people that did complete that survey. You'll be asked to complete that survey after this meeting as well today. And we hope to include everybody that's here today. So we'll ask you to participate in that. The data collection, I do have on my impact subscription agreement completed with Reedsville, Wasaki, Gillett, and Antigo, and they have access to their My Impact, and 2 of those districts I know for sure are already using My Impact with data in there. So thank you for getting that subscription agreement to me. And if you would like to subscribe to My Impact, please download that subscription agreement, fill it out, and you can send it to me at amiller@cesa8.org, and I'll put that here. Oops.
Joe, one question did surface
Mhm.
in our team talks or lightning talks around teachers inputting data into my impact. So do teachers need to have separate accounts if they're going to enter their data into My Impact?
They do. Yep.
Yep.
And if there's a district that needs help getting teachers having those separate accounts, then I can help that district. Do you recall what district that was?
Yeah. Kari asked the question, and I told her that yes, the teachers would have separate accounts, but I didn't know if you had, any other advice as they start getting everybody set up.
Yep. So I'll follow up with Kari, and we'll get that set up so that Kari's aware of how to get people in My Impact. And anybody choosing to sign up for My Impact, I'll help you get everybody onboarded, or I'll help you get everybody onboarded. If you are using the UDL data collector template, it would be helpful for us to know that you're using that, and you'll need to share your copy with editing access back to me and Michelle so that we can collect your data. So that data sharing agreement includes you sharing that copy of the collector template with us. Again, we don't support anything that might be going wrong. It is your responsibility to transform those observations into the data representations that are required on those other tabs. And directions for that are also included, or helpful guidance, not complete directions, but helpful guidances located in the toolkit as well. And then the participation log is how we keep track of how many students and how many teachers are impacted by our work. So I'm just going to go into Baldwin Woodville's tab so you can see what this looks like. Each person, each teacher that is participating in the trials ends up with a new row. So we have the list of teachers that are in the teams that are part of the trials. And then we include whether that teacher is general ed, whether they're special ed, whether they're English language. And then there's an other, and we don't need the details on that other because we're tracking ELL and special ed for the DPI. And then we need a total count of the students within the observation class, the students that are ELL, students with IEPs, and students without IEPs. And then we also need a count of the indicator students that are being the subject of the observations. So for example, we have both of the ELL students in Mrs. Fink's class that are observations indicator students, and the 2 students with IEPs. But none of the students without IEPs are part of Mrs. Fink's indicator student group or roster. So for each of those teachers, we need that information so we can get a total number of students who are impacted by our work, disaggregated by their IEP status as well as their EL status, and also the count of teachers that are impacted by our work, disaggregated by the type of teaching that they do. New mentors will be in the main room, and then continuing mentors, we're going to put you into a breakout room should you not want to stay in the main room. And then we're going to give you some time to start planning for part 4, stage 3. We'll give a little bit of an introduction to that, and then we'll give you time to work on that. We are going to split into 2 groups. We're going to differentiate for our new mentors and for our continuing mentors. And this is where we move from planning with the leaders into and kicking off that baseline data collection period with your teams into being able to process through that baseline data collection data with your teams. And that would be part 4, stage 3 in the toolkit. And when you jump in there, it's going to show you the 4 sections of stage 3 that learn the stage, grow as a mentor, lead the work, and know when to adjust. It's organized this way so that you can jump in wherever your level of comfort lies. So in the learn the stage, this just gives a quick overview of the parts and pieces that you'll need to complete in this stage, including a description of what that stage is. I'm going to give you my quick, like, what you need to do in this in the baseline data reflection meeting. Number 1, your teams and the teachers on your teams are going to have experienced hassles and friction in collecting observations and using the data tool. That needs to be resolved before they can even think about analyzing any baseline data. So if you jump into analyzing the baseline data first, they're going to let that confusion and frustration get in the way of them making good meaning out of the data. So the first thing that you should be thinking about is how to be that yes mentor for the folks that are in following you in learning through how to do the implementation trials. And we have provided a frequently asked questions tool in the mentor toolkit that provides you some guidance on some of the common questions or concerns that come up during the baseline data collection window. So there's some questions or concerns on the first column with some answer options on the right column. What I can say is do your best to say yes or be flexible and be okay with whatever the teachers are experiencing. We're not the ones in there, or most of us are not the ones in there that are trying to collect the observations while also teaching. And so to increase the buy-in or participation of the people within the classrooms that are collecting this information, we want to make this the easy path for them to follow. And the easiest path is the one that's going to work for them. So, for example, I've had multiple teams where there's a teacher who says, I just can't get 3 data collection instances within that data collection window. Maybe it's a short window, maybe there's been a lot of interruptions to the school schedule. That's okay. Our aim is to collect 3 or more, but if we can collect 2, that's what we're going to collect. We're going to be okay with that. We're going to get as much data as we can, you know, within the constraints of time and burden that we have, to be able to make some most informed judgments about whether the practices that we're putting into place are having the impacts that we desire. And those are the words that I use. That just collect as much data as you can so we can make our best informed judgment about whether the practices we're trying is having the impact that we desire. And that's the entire focus of these trials, whether it's a UDL practice or whether it's best practice that's in Danielson or Strong or culturally responsive practices. These trials and all of those practices are really best practices across all of those frameworks. So you can state it however you need to, but we want to know whether, or we want to make our best judgment about whether practices that we are putting in place are making a difference for the students that we have in front of us. So that learn the stage part just gives you a bare bones outline of what are the things that you need to do as a mentor to be able to prepare for the problem solving that data collector tool, and then really going into analyzing that baseline data and leading your teachers through looking at the representations through the data processing that happens so that they can fill out the data analysis sheet that's also a tool. And in that grow as a mentor section, that helps you have very specific information about each of those steps. So this is really about guidance, a lot of guidance on how do you get yourself prepared for that through running the meeting and then understanding the tools. And again, like I said, there's a baseline data analysis tool. There's an example with it filled out, what we would expect teachers to be able to include in that data analysis tool. Each teacher ends up making copy for themselves because they'll reflect on their own individual data. And then the lead the work section really are those facilitation techniques on how to go through that. So there's some mentoring prompts that are in there. And then the know when to adjust is some of the things that might happen during that meeting. Like finding out that one of the criteria is not easily observed or wouldn't be observed frequently. That's why we have 4. It might be okay to just say, well, if we don't think that that's observable, let's drop that one. Let's not stop the trials because we're hitting one little speed bump we know better for next year, right? So we can start doing that planning for really making this process very customized to the district and to the teams that we're serving. And so those know when to adjust parts are there for you as well. We want to provide you with as much time as possible and individual technical support should you request that right now. I'm going to ask everybody to try to move forward as much as you can on planning for that baseline reflection meeting or wherever you might be at this time. I will stay, I will stay active within the Zoom so that as you have questions during this work time that come up, then I'll be here and then everybody else can kind of listen on while they're working alongside for, it may be a common question that you have. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good planning time with folks that were in your room. Again, I want to mention that Michelle and I are available should you have questions, and for those of you who have a CISA mentor that can help you out too, please tap into them with additional questions about how to go about your baseline data reflection meeting. So in our closure, we have our after session mentor user group survey. So if everybody could click in there and take that survey, that helps us make sure that we're serving you in a way that is going to provide you the greatest amount of help and also allows us to give feedback to the DPI to ensure that our work is supported or continues to be supported. Our next meeting date is November 6th, 2024 at 9 o'clock. And the link is included in the calendar invite that you received, as well as on the UDL Forward community in the mentor user group under those events. So you can always get at the link in multiple different ways. We do use the same link every time. So you can go back into any one of the emails that you have from us or any one of the calendar invites, and it will be the same link. And then as a reminder, do complete that UDL Implementation Trials participation log. That you can have your teachers fill that out during the baseline reflection meeting. And during that same meeting, make sure that all your teachers, participants are taking that 24-25 UDL educator practices and student learning survey. That provides us another avenue to understand the impact that we have through the trials work on teachers across the state, as well as their perceptions of their student learning. Michelle, any last words before we sign off for the day?
Again, have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And please reach out if you need any support with questions, resources, etc. We're always happy to connect with you.
Have a great rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you in November.